Thank you. Well, I like any description of me as young. I'm 40 years old, and last year when I was 39, I would always describe young as under 40. Now that I'm 40, I describe young as 40 and under. Next year, I'll have to come up with something else. But it's my great honor to be here. This is such a distinguished gathering, and I very much appreciate that there are such a range of individuals in the audience, from students to individuals from the ambassadorial corps to think tanks and what have you. So I very much appreciate and am honored and am humbled by the interest in this topic today. And I want to start off by talking about something that is almost undiplomatic to talk about aloud, and that is power. I don't care about technology by itself. I was a medieval history major, and I don't think that diplomats should care about technology. I think that diplomats in government should concern itself with advancing their foreign policy interests. And right now, the United States is having to contend with the fact that increasingly ubiquitous and increasingly powerful information networks are having a wildly disruptive impact on power. If I have learned one thing in working for Hillary Clinton for the last 3 years, it is that there is a massive shift of geopolitical power taking place. And that shift in power is from hierarchies, like the nation state, like government, from hierarchies exercising power in a top-down fashion, to individuals and networks of individuals. We see this all around the world. People oftentimes talk about about the changing nature of power on a geographic basis, from Europe and the US to Asia, from the global north to the global south. I'm not going to talk about that today, but what I am going to talk about is a shift in power that I think is every bit as powerful. A shift of power from hierarchies, including the nation state, to citizens and networks of citizens. And by way of illustration, I'm going to give one example that comes from my office. I imagine that you are familiar with the earthquake that took place in Haiti in January of last year. That earthquake took place at the end of the day in the United States. And when we got Hillary Clinton on the telephone and explained to her the level of devastation in Haiti, what she said to us was, by the time people wake up tomorrow morning and are drinking their first cup of coffee, I want you to have a program in place right then, right at that very moment, so that the American people can get involved in giving back for the earthquake relief. And this is the end of the day, and we have to have a program working in 12 hours. And there was a group of women in my office, 2 Katies and a Kate. And these young women got the idea. They said, everybody in the United States has a mobile phone. And everybody uses SMS. Everybody sends these text messages. Let's set up a program where if you send a text message with the word Haiti, and it goes to a specific short code, $10 gets added to your phone bill, to your telephone bill, and all $10 goes to earthquake relief efforts benefiting the Red Cross. We thought this was a good idea. We thought we might be able to raise a couple $100,000. And then we began to become a little bit more ambitious with it. And we said, none of us are celebrities. We haven't had, a marketing firm working with us, but we all understand social media. Let's see if we can harness the power of social media to make this little text messaging program of ours, which we're setting up with no money. Let's see if we can make this something big. And using Twitter and using Facebook, we raised $35 million in 2 weeks. more than 3 million Americans sent that text message. And what's fascinating about that is that this was really done by 3 young women in my office and me. Four people who didn't have a single committee meeting, who didn't have $10 of budget, but because of the ubiquity and power of social media, our ability to build a campaign that was massive in scale was easier to do than ever before, because processing and distribution power has devolved to the individual in a way that wasn't previously possible. Now the shift in power, I would argue, is more powerful, is more notable in terms of its economic impact than anything else. By way of illustration, 10 years ago, which is not that long ago, 10 years ago, in order to run a basic business application on the internet, it cost about $150,000 per month. If you wanted to run a sophisticated business application on the internet for a business, $150,000 a month. Now what this means as a practical matter is that if you wanted to start a new internet company, you needed to start with about $2 million to sort of get started with a real company. And what this meant was that you either needed to already be wealthy, you had to have wealthy friends, or you had to be able to raise a round of angel investing or venture capital. Today, just 10 years later, the same applications that cost $150,000 now cost $1,500 per month through cloud computing. And the impact of this is very simple. It means that a 22-year-old in a university dorm room can test the concept for a company, can build a breakthrough application or innovation with a level of ease and with a lower barrier to entry than was ever before possible. It's one of the fascinating dynamics in the United States right now is to see the number of companies that are starting off with very modest origins, that are literally being self-funded out of people's checkbooks for very little money, which are then able to grow fast very quickly. And it also makes it, because of these very low costs, it also makes it easy to fail, and it's not a big deal. So people are able to test the concept of a company very, very quickly, and either it works or it fails. And what's notable for us in the United States is, as we think about the future of our economy, the United States will never again be dominated by its manufacturing or industrial base. Given the nature of globalization, the only way that the United States is going to be able to compete and succeed in a world that is increasingly technology-rich and knowledge-based is going to be through the formation of new firms. It's going to be because we are able to compete and succeed in the realm of new ideas and new innovation, because we are not well positioned to just make things more cheaply than everybody else. So to the extent that we are able to compete and succeed, it is because the ideas in the heads of these university students are able to become big companies fast. And this is very consistent with the culture of the United States. 40% of our GDP, 40% of America's GDP comes from companies that did not exist 35 years ago. 40% of our GDP comes from companies that did not exist 35 years ago. And if the United States is going to be the great nation in 2025 that it is today, then it's going to be because we are able to fill up slides with logos of companies that everybody knows that doesn't exist today. So this lower barrier to entry for entrepreneurship and innovation has profound impacts for global economic growth, And certainly for the United States, if we are not able to do new firm formation, if we are not able to do new innovation, we will lose our standing as a global power. Now, I do think it's important to say that not all of this technology is all for the good. I think that people oftentimes take a naive and utopian view of the internet and of digital technologies. And I think that Hillary Clinton put it well when she likened the internet, our information networks, to nuclear power. She said, just as nuclear power can fuel a city or destroy it, so too can our information networks. The internet and digital technologies itself is inanimate. It is value neutral. It takes on the values and intentions of its users. And one negative manifestation of this I would point to is cybercrime. In the same manner in which one is able to start a new company easier than ever, in the same manner in which a group of young diplomats can start a campaign to fund earthquake relief in Haiti and raise $35 million in 2 weeks, as easy as those things become, so too has a new class of criminal become empowered to an almost unimaginable extent. And as we see the economic benefits of connectivity growing, as we see connectivity having a growing and increasingly disruptive for both good and ill, an increasingly impactful role in political life, so too do we see the internet playing a more forceful role in the criminal world. And cybercrime, I would argue, is going to be one of the great challenges for all governments over the next 5 years. So I would just re-emphasize that the technologies itself are value neutral. They take on the values and intentions of its users. Now, one thing that's gotten a lot of attention that I want to speak to briefly today is about the role of social media and of technology in revolution. A lot of people, I think, have mischaracterized the revolutions in the Middle East as being Facebook revolutions or Twitter revolutions. I reject calling these revolutions Facebook revolutions or Twitter revolutions. Because for me, when you call something a Twitter revolution or something like this, what this says is that people are rebelling because of social media, or the revolution is successful because of social media. And I don't think that's true. I think that that is inaccurate. I think that people rebel because of things like high food prices, frustration with ruling families, corruption, the lack of democratic participation in economic opportunity. I spent a lot of time over the last year with people who sort of have made these revolutions in the Middle East, and this is why people rebelled. They didn't rebel because of social media. Now, having said that, I do think that with the benefit of hindsight and some analysis, we can identify 4 things that technology and social media have done in political dissent and in these revolutions specifically. Number 1, it has accelerated movement making. Building a movement, a political movement, can take place faster now than was ever the case previously. If you think about past movement making, whether it was the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa or in the democracy movements during the Cold War in Eastern Europe, these were movements that took years to build. And it oftentimes meant, intensive collaboration between individuals with very strong ties between them, meeting under cover of night in basements and such things. One of the interesting things about social media is because the platforms are so open, it allows for participation and it allows for movement making in an extremely accelerated fashion. In Tunisia, for example, from the time of a fruit seller, Mohamed Bouazizi, lighting himself on fire and providing the spark that began the Tunisian revolution, from him lighting himself on fire to a presumed dictator for life, Ben Ali, getting on a plane and flying to Saudi Arabia was 5 weeks. From the most recent, from the first protest in Tahrir Square to Hosni Mubarak resigning was 4 weeks. So what we see is that movement making has been wildly accelerated. Number two, interestingly, for the purposes of exercising dissent, we see weak ties made stronger, in part because of connections initially made online. So one of the things that I was curious about within the context of the Arab revolutions was, what is it that brought together this 60-year-old member of the Muslim Brotherhood to stand shoulder to shoulder with a 20-year-old Sorbonne-educated, Nike shoe-wearing digital hipster? And the research demonstrates that part of what brought that 60-year-old together with that 20-year-old were connections initially made on the internet that took them to work together offline in the real world. Now, having said that, now that we've demonstrated that the internet is something with some efficiency of bringing people together of unlike type for the purposes of exercising dissent, I think that as you transition into elections and into governance, I actually see the internet pulling people apart. The internet is a very bad place for moderation. It's a very bad place for compromise. And this is true, I believe, everywhere. It's certainly true in the United States. It's the voices at the edge of the political spectrum that tend to be amplified. And so while I think that the internet has done a great deal to help people together for the purposes of exercising dissent, when you get into the more nuanced and difficult work of elections and governance, I see it pulling people apart. The third thing we see is an enriched information environment. It used to be the case that governments could control the media and information environments in their country. They cannot do that anymore. In Tunisia, for example, in 2008, which was not that long ago, 2008, there were only 28,000 Facebook accounts in Tunisia. So basically the children of the elite. 2 years later, just 2 years, there were 1.4 million. From 28,000 to 1.4 million Facebook accounts in 2 years. The impact of this is that the government could no longer control the information environment in the country. And people like this were able to record what was taking place, publish it on social media platforms, and people were then able to become more sophisticated consumers of information. I think that the changing nature of the information environment is something that everybody is going to have to contend with, including our neighbors to the north, with the increasing reach of mobile networks into the northern part of North Korea. So I think that one of the things that we can all take for granted is that people's access to information is only going to grow. The fourth and final thing that I think we can say about technology, social media, and revolution is that it facilitates leaderless movements. There's nobody's face that you're going to put on a t-shirt for many of these revolutions in the Middle East. Where's Nelson Mandela? Where's Václav Havel? Where's Lech Walesa? Where are the great revolutionary leaders that after the revolution, everybody then says, you are our leader, you are our president, we are going to come together as a nation and follow you. This is one of the downsides of accelerated movement making. If you think again about the anti-apartheid movement, there was institutional development with the ANC and individual leadership development with the likes of Nelson Mandela. Similarly, in the democracy movements in Eastern Europe, we had institutions developed like Solidarity in Poland and leaders like Lech Walesa. Right now, there are diplomats running all over Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, looking for Thomas Jefferson, looking for that leader who can pull together the nation, and they're not finding reason for that is that one of the things that technology and social media has done is it has facilitated leaderlessness, or more nodal leadership. Now, on the one hand, this is a good thing, because if there were one or two leaders, for example, in the Syrian revolution, Bashar al-Assad would have killed him by now. And because there aren't one or two, three leaders in any of these countries, it doesn't mean that they can just be arrested and killed and the revolution is over. But what it does mean is that it makes it, again, more difficult when you pivot into elections and you pivot into governance. Now, the overall impact of this is government feeling overwhelmed. All of this redistribution of power from hierarchies to citizens and networks of citizens means that government loses control. And one of the things that I think we can safely say is that the 21st century is a lousy time to be a control freak. I think all of our leaders would have liked to have had the kind of control that they had 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. But it's gone, and it's not coming back. And I think it's actually a test of character of our governments to see how they respond to the empowerment of their citizens at their own expense. You can do one of two things. You can fight the loss of control. You can increasingly surveil your citizens. You can try to over-regulate the internet, or you can recognize its benefits, and you can try to work within that context. But for me, this loss of control that comes with connectivity is like gravity. You can say gravity is good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's there. And this loss of control that comes with connectivity and the empowerment of individual citizens that comes with connectivity, I view as similarly inevitable. And so what we find ourselves right now as government officials, we find ourselves in situations of overwhelming change. And so at the beginning of my remarks, I said, the one thing that I've learned over the last 3 years is that there's a massive redistribution of geopolitical power from hierarchies to citizens and networks of citizens. If I were asked now, what's the one piece of advice after this experience that you would give to a head of state, to a foreign leader, it's this. Recognize that it is not the strongest of the human species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but that most adaptable to change. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent. It is that most adaptable to change. We are in a period of rapid change that is disorienting to public officials around the world. And in the face of this, what we need is a level of nimbleness and adaptability in the face of this change. And it's not going to come easily. In the United States, for example, I think about WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks, I would argue, simply could not have happened 15 years ago. The combination of bandwidth and physical processing power available at the desktop of a 22-year-old Army private would have been insufficient to download 250,000 classified cables. Further, the WikiLeaks organization is largely made up of members and followers instead of paid staff. It's based on a web address instead of a street address. It is a truly transnational virtual network organization. And this kind of virtual organization that can work against the interests of even the most powerful countries like the United States are empowered in a way that would have been unimaginable 10 years ago. So it's very interesting to me to see very small institutions be able to exercise power, the likes of which would have previously taken the backing of a very large government or a very large institution. So with that, I will thank you. I will conclude my remarks, and I'd be very pleased to take any questions. And let me say from the outset that even though I'm a diplomat, feel free to ask undiplomatic questions. because those tend to be the most interesting. Thank you very much.